coming out of a place like Sidwell where success is kind of like a given, that's just like what you're supposed to aim for, I think you can try to rush towards that. And I would tell myself, like, it'll come.
Yeah.
It'll happen on its own time. Don't force it.
You're listening to Lives that Speak, a podcast highlighting the remarkable work of Sidwell Friends School alumni. I'm Bryan Garman, head of school at Sidwell Friends, a pre-K to 12th grade independent Quaker school located in Washington, D.C. In this interview, I sat down with Ava Coleman, class of 2011. From interning at D.C.'s own 930 Club while she was a student at Sidwell Friends, to managing a Grammy-nominated musical artist, and eventually writing for the Tina Fey-produced sitcom Girls 5 Ava has spent nearly her entire life around the entertainment industry. Currently, Ava is the executive story editor on the Golden Globe and Emmy-winning ABC sitcom Abbott Elementary, which recently concluded its second season. In this episode, we discuss her experience in the industry, how she approaches writing, and the importance of developing a healthy balance and perspective in life. Thanks for being back at Sidwell Friends School.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And you're here not just for this podcast, but you are here for Let Your Life Speak Day as well.
Correct.
What are you thinking about telling the students tomorrow? We have this whole theme of carrying hope forward.
Mm-hmm.
What's on your mind about maybe sharing with our students?
I think, I've been thinking about this a lot and hoping that I have a good amount of wisdom to share. I think the main thing is how easy it is to carry hope forward, and how I didn't know that I did, but once this prompt was brought to my attention, I realized, I do that every day at my work, and, through comedy and through writing and trying to just figure out life through stories that I tell. Yeah. Like, that's kind of what we do as writers. And you don't have to think about it too much. It kind of just happens naturally. And if you have a good outlook on life and just even a tiny bit of hope, that's usually pretty contagious.
What makes your work meaningful to you?
I think it just helps me, like I think I just said, like, understand life. Like, everything that I write about is something that I'm confused about and I need help parsing. And so I'm taking all the things, things that happened to me at Sidwell, things in college, things in the working force, and I'm plugging that into everything I work on, and just to kind of understand why things happen, why people are the way that they are, and how to help people, going through what we've all been through.
The show is very funny.
Thank you.
And it demonstrates a lot of empathy. The characters demonstrate a lot of empathy for each other. Is that part of what you're trying to get across?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, in my previous career in the music industry, I didn't really have a lot of time for, unpacking what other people might be going through and thinking, I tried with my artists and my coworkers, but I think as a writer, you have so much time just to think and to empathize and to, imagine how people feel. And that helps you in the real world understand, why things shake out the way they do.
So you're thinking about speaking to our students tomorrow, which means you must be thinking about your time at Sidwell to some extent.
Yeah.
What stands out to you in your Sidwell Friends experiences?
I think the main thing, so many things have come up for me in the past couple weeks thinking about it. I think the people that I often think about are my best friends and the teachers that really helped me. I went through a lot of hard things at Sidwell, very emotional child, definitely dealt with depression in middle school and high school. And so I have these teachers who really helped me through that before I really knew what it was. Like teacher Ann Charney, she was my advisor, and my English teacher. And she, I think, really understood that I was dealing with stuff that I couldn't really name. And she, she let me go talk to Miss Carlene in the front office, like, I would,
Jackson,
right? I would leave class if I wasn't feeling well emotionally. I could just kind of be like, "Can I be excused?" And I could go talk to her for, 10 minutes and get my spirits back up and go back into class. And so I think about teachers like that, and Rachel Jackson in the upper school
Yeah.
and Lauren Brownlee.
Oh, sure.
Miss Nick in middle school.
Uh-huh.
I had the beginnings of a health issue that I deal with now called Ehlers-Danlos. I
Oh,
started
wow.
experiencing that in middle school. So Nurse Jasmine, I was always
Yeah.
in the nurse's office.
Yeah.
So I had
Amazing
these
people.
really special teachers that gave me a lot of grace. And then I had my two best friends, Lark Tony and Taylor Riley,
Mhm.
who we were thick as thieves and just
Yeah.
celebrated Taylor's 30th birthday.
Oh, that's great. So you
2
stay in
days
touch
ago.
regularly?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was in town in time for Taylor's birthday, and we talk all the time, and those were the relationships that kept me going through adolescent troubles.
You're living in California now?
I am in LA, yeah.
In LA. And that's where you ended up after Sidwell Friends,
Yep.
right? USC.
Yeah.
And what did you do at USC that maybe prepared you for what you're doing now?
It's interesting. I was on a totally different path. Big part of my personality at Sidwell was that I wanted to manage boy bands. That was like my very narrow dream, very specific, and that came from being a fan girl. So I was a massive fan of, these pop punk bands and Justin Bieber and the Jonas Brothers. Like I had all these phases in every different grade, and I wanted to create bands like that and bring them to girls like me. So that's what got me to LA. I became obsessed with Scooter Braun.
Right.
I really found him through being a Bieber fan and being a fan of this rapper Asher Roth. Realized they had the same manager and said, great, I'm going to do that. Ended up meeting Scooter while I was still in high school at Sidwell, and he told me, I mean, you're a kid, but if you ever grow up and move to LA, you should apply for an internship. So that's what got me to apply to USC. That's what got me to LA.
I see.
And by the end of my freshman year, I started working for him basically full time throughout school while majoring in comm and minoring in music industry. So screenwriting was not on the radar at all. And I went through a whole 7-year career that actually kind of started at Sidwell with my senior project at 930 Club. I did a month at 930
My daughter
Club.
did a project at 930
Really?
Club also, yeah.
Yeah, so that was my first job, first thing in the music industry, and then I went off to work for Scooter and kind of went in a totally different direction.
Yeah, yeah. But your family was in entertainment,
Right.
Right? And your mom, who's got a new book out,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Must have been an influence on you.
Yeah, she was. I think that was part of what made me feel a little bit different than the other students at Sidwell. I didn't ever feel like I had similar dreams to the people around me because I do, think my exposure to the entertainment industry from a young age was just very different from the typical Sidwell student.
Yeah.
They were
And groundbreaking entertainment too, really, right?
Yeah. Yeah, really cool stuff. I got to see a lot of really interesting things for a young girl living in D.C.
Yeah.
And, I looked up to my mom and still do in a lot of ways. And also she set the bar very high for me. So I always felt like if I became a music manager, I had to be the best one in the world ever so that I could at least get close to the levels of success my mom reached, which I've kind of let that competition part of it go and now, can focus on my creative pursuits. But yeah, her and my dad's a successful lawyer, really were great examples for me and my brother.
So you came into this thinking at first you were going to be managing musicians.
Right.
And then you make this transition to writing.
Yes.
Talk to us about how that came about. What was that process?
Yeah.
And how you discovered it.
It was very slow and then very fast. So I did spend about 7 years, I think, at Scooter Braun Projects and did all the different roles at that company. And while I was an executive assistant and still a senior at USC, I came up with the idea for the Bieber Comedy Central roast, which was a way for the world to be reintroduced to Justin Bieber, but also to show him, being able to poke fun at his past and kind of take responsibility. I had always seen him as a very funny, charismatic kid, which was not really what was being talked about.
Right.
And so I thought a roast would be a fun way to kind of bring that to the forefront. And through that process, Scooter and my boss, Allison Kay at the time, they let me be involved on all the calls and listen in and help pick people for the dais, the people that would roast and be roasted. And that was my first inkling, and that was 2015, that, I might prefer the comedy and the writing and the television aspect of this industry. Yeah. But I'm already, starting to get my own clients as a manager. And so I wasn't quite sure how to detangle myself from the music industry. So I just kept going in it for like 4 more years until 2019, my cousin Cara turned 30 and threw herself a birthday roast, asked me to write and perform a 5-minute set. And I wrote it, had the most fun I'd had in years, performed, I killed, and I quit my music job the next month to focus on writing full time.
So that was the transition, was through comedy specifically.
Specifically, yeah. Which surprised me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have influences comedic influences that stand out to you?
I do, but it's funny because I didn't know that they were influences until 2019 when I started writing. I just thought they were things that I liked. But I really grew up, my time at Sidwell, I was very into late night television. Huge Conan O'Brien fan. Sure. Always loved SNL. But all the late nights, like, Fallon and Seth Meyers. And I really enjoyed just watching funny people talk. It wasn't necessarily that I was watching sitcoms thinking, I can do that, or, I want to make one of these. It was more just I was fascinated by funny conversations and interactions, sketches. And then as I got older, people like Michaela Cole and Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and I love British anything. Yeah. I think British comedy is right up my alley. So there always been, great shows from overseas that have really inspired me. So it's a wide-ranging group. And
what do you like best about writing for television?
I've never thought about it. Yeah. I think it's just, it's really nice to work with other people. Yeah. To work in that collaborative writer's room is a really good brain exercise. And even on days where you feel like you maybe didn't contribute that much, the people around you are still brilliant and smart. Like, we all are allowed to have our off days and our good days because it is a team effort. So getting to create with other people and then have a broad audience for it and people actually see it and actually interact with it, that I never expected that to be my life. So it's been really fun to be able to, think of issues we want to share with the world and talk about, and then actually have the world participate has been really nice.
And love it.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. What's that process look like when you sit down and you're trying to come up with the next episode? Walk us through what one of those discussions might look like. Feel like.
So we're led by Quinta Brunson, and then we have 2 showrunners, Justin and Pat, and they will guide us on all the planning and logistics and what we need to get done. They will lay that out very clearly for us so that as the writers, we can come, with just the creative ideas, just the spitballing, we call it blue skying at the beginning of the season, where we just are throwing anything out. And, if it sticks, then we double down on that idea, see if we can, put it into beats, into like a 3-act structure. Is there enough in this, idea or problem to fill out an episode? But, we also talk about it from the angle of, what does this character know? What do we want them to learn? What do we want to see them learn and experience? Where do we think they should go? And so, we treat these characters like real people, and they feel very real to us. So, each episode and each topic comes about a little bit differently, but I think we always start from that very human place of like, what's real, and then how can we make it a little silly?
Yeah, and it sounds like you spent a lot of time on character development.
That's my personal favorite part of the process, I think, is thinking about voice and character development. That's the part that comes naturally to me. I'd say I lean more on my coworkers for like the plot. Sometimes that comes with the character development. You just have a feeling of what someone would do. But for me, it's much more interesting doing like the character study aspect of it. And so that is what I tend to think about the most.
Yeah. You can feel that in the episodes that you've written.
Oh, thank
too,
you.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about Barbara and the way she's developed. You said you liked her. What is it that you like about Barbara?
I love Barbara because she's lived a lot of life. She's very comfortable with who she is, but she's pushed by the young people around her to re-examine that. And, she's very stubborn in a lot of ways, but she's actually a lot more open, I think, than it seems at first glance. And she does learn a lot, and she does, admit to her mistakes, though it takes some time. In
a very sophisticated way.
Yeah. But it's very interesting for me to write for someone of her generation, because that's my parents' generation. Yeah. So there are a lot of things that I work out through the character of Barbara. And then there's a lot of things that I've just seen, not even just from my parents, but their friends and other people in my life of that age. Like, there's so many differences between them and, my generation, how we handle emotional issues. And so it's been really fun to kind of step into those shoes, because in some ways I feel like a very old soul, and in other ways I feel like I haven't changed at all since I was at Sidwell. Right. So it's nice to be able to go back and forth between all those personalities, I guess.
So she's the mentor teacher, right?
Yes.
She's very successful. Mm-hmm. And in Fire, the great character development, I thought, was her admitting the worries she had about her spouse and the way she shared those, especially with the little boy. It's a very moving scene. Did you you came up with that? That's your writing and your character development for her?
We all came up with it together as a group, but I definitely honed in on it and wrote it out from the outline stage into an actual script. And that moment with the little boy was really nice for me, because what I felt was Barbara, she'll open up to her friend, Melissa, and tell her this is what's going on within my family. But she's not going to go around and explain that to everybody, because it's not really everybody's business. And, she hasn't done anything so wrong that she has to, beg for forgiveness and explain everything. But when she sees that little boy, and I think that was largely Quinta's idea, was to have her see a student still afraid, and then that be kind of the awakening moment for her. I like the way she kind of spoke in code to him of saying, we all get scared, not saying, not telling too much, and obviously nothing that a small child wouldn't understand. But I thought it was very in her character, the way she broke it down for him. And you see it in Cheryl Lee Ralph's amazing performance. You see it in her face and her eyes, like how big it really is. But to this kid, it's just helping him get through the moment.
It's very sweet.
Yeah.
Very sweet. And so is the relationship between Barbara and Janine, which by the time you get to Mom, the most recent episode, seems to have changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
How have you conceived of that, you and your peers, in terms of the arc of that relationship?
Yeah, I think, it's a very real thing that a lot of us have felt, is you have these members of your family that are not related to you by blood, and you meet them in many different ways and places, and oftentimes it's not a perfect relationship. And I think that's what pulls me in towards Janine and Barbara so much, is they do butt heads a lot, but they care about each other. And you don't really butt heads with people like that when you don't care about them. That's kind of part of the bond. And you can only get annoyed with someone that much when you love them, and you really want to see them do better. So I think, that relationship has taken a lot of different turns, but the truth of it is that they are there for each other and they need each other, which I think is fun to see a character like Barbara realize, this is a person who I didn't know 3 years ago, but now, I'm sure she can't imagine her life without her. So it's been really nice to follow that.
Yeah, yeah. So why do you think this show is resonating so deeply with people right now? What is it speaking to our moment in some way, or some concern of our moment, or some joy in our moment? What is it what do you make of the success?
I'll be honest, I don't make that much of it. I try to stay out of it. I love that people love it, and I loved it. I joined in the second season,
Right.
so I wasn't a part of the first season, and I watched it as a fan, and I felt, how grounded it was. So I think that's part of what attracted me to it, is that it's silly, but again, it's real, and it's heartwarming, but it's not spoon feeding you any sort of, lessons are learned. I love lessons. I love people, hopefully being able to walk away having learned something or felt a new feeling or, put the pieces to some puzzle together. But it's always a fine line of you never want to be too heavy-handed with that.
Yeah.
And I think that the bosses at Abbott are great at managing that. And I think it comes through. But I also think it's funny. And people want to laugh. And it's a wide-ranging level of comedies and humors and different types of jokes. Like there are jokes in there for my mom, there are jokes in there for me, and there are jokes in there for hopefully, Sidwell students. So I think that there's a little something for everybody, which is really nice.
It's very inviting.
Thank you.
And what about the lessons? You mentioned lessons that are learned from it. What are some of the most important lessons that you want to convey through it? Not that it's didactic necessarily, but there are these little gems in it that make each episode and in part want you to come back for more, right? That's part of what makes you come back is there are these little lessons. What have been some of the most successful lessons you've conveyed?
I have the things that I hope people gather from my episodes, and we've touched on those a little bit, but I think the main thing that we've done and Quinta's done so well is show how important teachers are. Yeah. And that's been really amazing for me to be a part of because, some of the writers have parents that were teachers or still are teachers. But where I'm coming from is, I was a student. And so it's realizing in retrospect how important those figures are and how much they deserve. And obviously they deserve to be paid and to live comfortably. But also that these are like, they're not your parents, but they do a lot of parenting. And they're incredibly important figures with rich inner lives. They bring a lot of stuff to school with them and still do their jobs. So I think that's the big lesson that we carry through every episode, and that's part of the show's DNA. And then as far as other lessons, I think it's just what people take from it. You try not to control the reaction, but just make sure that they end up feeling something, and that's the most important thing.
How does the principal end up being named Ava Coleman?
It's a funny. No, it's it's a coincidence. So basically, I knew Quinta socially before the show. Okay. But not super well. Well enough that the name Ava Coleman sounded like a good name to her. And then when I ended up going out for the job, season 1, I read the script as you do before you go on these staffing meetings in this business. And I'm reading the script at 6 a.m. with a cup of coffee and almost spit my coffee out. Because I'm like, okay, that's not just my first or my last name. That's, that's the whole thing. So basically, she liked the name Ava, wanted to name the character Ava. And then Coleman fits. That sounds nice, too. And it was just a big mistake that ended up being, very silly and funny, especially when I joined. And the crew was like, excuse me?
What do you make of her character? How do you think of her in the show and in her relationships with others? I mean, my wife said, well, she's the character who has the most growth to do, right? The most growing to do. How do you think of her?
I think she's very real. And I love writing for her because I get to share these parts of myself that I would maybe keep a little quieter. I get to put those words in her mouth. Just the things about enjoying the luxuries of life. And, sometimes it goes way too far, right? But it's not necessarily wrong. She got, there's just levels to, extravagance. And I love how Janelle James plays her. Yeah. But yeah, she's definitely a complicated figure, but she brings a lot of chaos, but also joy to the school through her antics. And, I tend to root for her. I think she's a really important presence.
I love this piece. I think it was in Mom with Gregory and Shanae. And the bonding over the Orioles. That was it, and it seems like Jacob plays that role a lot. He tries to create these situations where he brings out the best in people, where he tries to bring people together.
Yeah, that was a really fun story to write because it shows a lot of things, but what really I took away from it is you just can't force things, right? It's like, it's nice to connect with people, but it doesn't work when you're doing it just to connect. So that, that's kind of where I feel that Gregory and Jacob learned a lesson in that, because Jacob at the beginning is like, well, just fix it. And it's like, well, that's not really how life works. You can't just start getting along with somebody. And, they all kind of realize that this organic bonding experience of rooting for the Orioles is what's going to do it for them. But no one could have guessed, that would be the thing, or that would wash away their previous, beef. So I really enjoy Jacob's good intentions, and then realizing sometimes that's not all it takes.
Yeah. And so we're talking about Baltimore, but how did we end up in Philadelphia? What led to the setting of the show there?
Quinta's background. She's from Philly. Her mom was a public school teacher in Philadelphia, and so that was really important for her to just show that specific part of her story and what she's seen and what she knows those teachers deal with on a daily basis. So it's fun, to have that proximity to DC, obviously, different places, but I know enough about Philly and spent enough time in Philly to feel like I understood where we were coming from. Yeah,
I've spent some time there too, and it does a great job of tapping into the Eagles and the Philly. Right, there's an authenticity to it.
Right.
There's the South Philly characters, right? There and characters from different neighborhoods, and it just seems like it seems that it has a real sense of place. Have all the writers spent time there, or is it just happenstance that you and you've been there?
Most of the writers have spent a little bit of time there, and some of the other writers are from Philly area or Pennsylvania, and then others, I think, just know about it. Did the research and get it through osmosis from those who are from the area. So that's been really fun, I think, to have the different perspectives that can all, be placed in Philadelphia.
TV has changed so much, not necessarily since you've been writing, right? But certainly since you experienced it. I read a piece that was in the Times recently that talked about how before the streaming era, we would all have watched the same show and would all come in and talk about it the next day. Right. So I can remember that with, let's say, Cosby. I can remember it with iconic shows like Friends. This particular article was talking about Seinfeld.
Okay.
Right. What has changed about the ability of television to create community? Or are we just creating it in a different way now? I'd just be interested in your perspective on that and how it might affect your writing.
Yeah, I think we're creating it in a different way, and I think it's a lot more small communities that we're building around shows. So, it isn't that same appointment television that I remember from, a few years ago. But it is, you can build deeper connections with people on more specific shows. And, like I'm into Korean dramas, which, it's very different than what I do for my work. But I've been able to, make friendships surrounding those shows that we all watch at different times, binge watch or however but it's more of a common interest, but just with the smaller community, and I think it's good. It doesn't bother me. I think it's all positive if it's helping you connect with other people.
What are you watching? What's really good in your view, other than Abbott Elementary?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't watch a ton of TV right now other than Korean dramas because I do feel like it's so different from work that it
You
takes
need
my
an
mind
escape.
off it. Yeah,
You know,
but
I usually can't watch education shows.
right.
But I can watch Abbott Elementary.
That's great.
Right?
I like to hear that.
and the only other show that I could watch, it is an academic show, but that was hard to watch, but I thought it was very good, was The Chair. Do you know that?
Okay, no, I remember
Yeah.
on Netflix.
That was very good.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I need to check that one out. I mean, I think the main thing I'm watching, which does still kind of have that appointment television vibe, is Succession.
How can you not watch
Yeah.
it? Right? That last episode
Yeah.
was killer.
Yeah. So
Right?
that show keeps me on my toes, and it gets me very excited about what we do as
Yeah. What do you
TV
like about
writers.
it?
It's so outlandish in the, I'm overusing the word real, but in the real stories it tells. Like, these are, I think a lot of people view the characters as all bad and no one to root for.
Yeah.
But I find it, I find them all very intriguing and very complicated and deeply sad in a way that's also funny. And I love that. I love being able to, I love dark humor. I love
It's dark.
the way that the unexpected ways they make you laugh on that show,
Right.
and the way they can, release the tension through a laugh and the sharp turns that they take. And it's just a world that feels so far away from anything I've ever experienced. But again, you feel like even though you might not know this like super rich New York type of family, people that act like, parts of all of those characters. So it can be very cathartic in ways as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about dark humor, and I think about also White Lotus, which
Yeah.
was did you?
I loved White Lotus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
So that there is your kind of humor is in that too, right?
Right.
It is darker,
Right.
right? But there's also there's something that comes from that dark humor. How would you see that as different from the type of humor that you're providing at Abbott Elementary, right? Which is a kind of feel good humor.
Yeah.
Is there a different function that the dark humor serves?
I think it can be, but I do think we actually can veer into that lane on Abbott as well. Like the way that we talk about certain teachers, right, that aren't good, or the teachers that aren't putting their best foot forward. Like we can do a bit of satire as well. And I think that's kind of what the White Lotus and Succession teams do so well. But yeah, I mean, there's comedy that's supposed to make you feel good, and there's comedy that's supposed to make you think.
Right.
I don't ever try to figure out what kind of comedy I'm writing when I'm writing it. I'm just, whatever happens, and if it's the right fit for what we're working on, then we keep it in, and if not, we take it out. But I think shows like White Lotus have been able to kind of make you laugh through the pain of what you're watching and how upsetting it actually is. But it also shows you a whole different world that you didn't know existed, or the underbelly of these different cultures. So it's really interesting.
Interesting episode on Abbott Elementary is when Jacob teaches Black history. How did that come about? That whole the thinking about that, and because it's such a very timely topic and such an interesting one. Yeah. How did that come to fruition in the episode, and what did you think was conveyed through that?
I'd love to give the writer who came up with that idea credit, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I do remember talking about it. And my feeling about it was, it's all about, not all, but a lot about the intention behind what you're doing. Yeah. And Jacob's intentions are very good. So I think to the naked eye, it's interesting to see a white teacher teach a room full of Black students about their history, but that's the reality of the situation. He's their teacher. That's what they need to learn. So I think it was really interesting to show his self-awareness about it. He knows who he is. He knows that it's kind of funny that he's the one teaching them this, but he also takes that responsibility very seriously, and is a good teacher. And so that I think being able to show he's a very funny character and he takes a lot of jokes at his expense, but what we do know about him and what that episode was able to remind our audience of is that he's really good at this and that the school's very lucky to have him.
Yeah.
So, the parents can have some misconceptions, but the truth is he's making a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that it seems to me that the show does is to just suspend judgment all the time also.
Yeah.
Right. And to, I mean, you've used the word real. It's they're beautiful little stories about how people relate to one another in very imperfect ways, but still in ways that are very meaningful. I mean, I think about, again, Jacob getting his co-teacher up on the fire engine.
Yes.
Right. That was a sweet moment.
Right.
He engineers these.
Right.
And it seems like the writers are trying to engineer these moments of interaction that provide a kind of insight to us and a moment of happiness and again, where we started the conversation of hope.
Right. Yeah.
Right? The show is hopeful.
I totally agree. And I think we're coming from a place of, these teachers need much more than they have. But what can they give each other?
Yeah.
And what can their students give to them? That doesn't cost money and that isn't about what the district has made available to them. It's just about those interpersonal connections that get you through hard times.
Yeah, there's plenty of need.
Yes.
But there's also plenty of vitality and creativity there and good intentions and love, actually, for one another and for the students.
Right.
Which is a beautiful thing to see. You've also done some work with Tina Fey.
I have.
Yeah. What about that project? What stands out to you? What did you learn from it? What did you enjoy about it?
Oh, I learned so much I was on Girls 5 Eva for 2 seasons, the first 2 seasons of that show. The 3rd season will actually be on Netflix. The first 2 were on Peacock. But that was my first job in a room, and so I learned everything there. I learned how to be in a room. I learned how to contribute. I learned when to speak up, when to listen. But I think the main thing I learned was just how to write jokes from, some of the best in the business and the way that team, Meredith Scardino and her team over at Little Stranger, the way they write jokes is fast and furious. Every line is funny on their shows. So I had to learn how to write just as funny as possible, and then everything that I do from that point on will just be scaled back. So I think I got the crash course in comedy writing at a very, very high level, and it was like I was thrown into the deep end, but with very supportive people. And so I just learned how to really, really write precisely and write funny, and I've taken those lessons with me, over to Abbott. So that's been really great.
What other projects might be on the horizon for you? What are you thinking about? I mean, and anyone who's a writer always has, kind of a drawer full of projects. What are you thinking about?
I'm really interested in movies. I like the fact that they have endings, unlike shows, which, you kind of have to think very far into the future. But I've written a project that's based on my time at Sidwell, not necessarily about like the academic part of Sidwell, but very much based on how I felt as a teenager. And I'm really interested in investigating those adolescent feelings, and anything coming of age is very interesting to me. So there are characters from my time at Sidwell that, I haven't seen since I've been here, but are still very relevant to my life because of what we experienced together and what they taught me, or
how they shape you.
100%. So I'm very interested in those kind of like teen comedies of like just making funny situations out of growing pains.
Yeah.
And then, I love like romantic comedies, and I'm working on some stuff in that arena that I think just answers a lot of questions, or tries to answer a lot of questions about, what it's like being a almost 30-year-old woman at this time in the world.
Yeah. And what films do you especially enjoy? What comedies have you found especially important to you?
I think my favorite comedies would be like 10 Things I Hate About You, Lady Bird, like those kinds of things. My favorite movie of all time is not a comedy, but it is a teen movie, which is A Walk to Remember, which is very high school and melodramatic.
Yeah.
But
well, there's a whole genre of those, right? So you're building into the genre. You've got an installment planned.
Yes. So, I mean, I like anything just with like a cute love story and a coming of age story. And I'm like, why don't I know what my favorite movies are? There's this movie called The Duff that's another high school movie. Just things that kind of bring me back to that time. Because I do think high school was like, I don't think I peaked in high school, but I enjoyed it a lot. And I like going back. I like thinking about it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. What would you tell your 18-year-old self? I mean, you'll be talking to our students tomorrow.
I know.
What advice would you have for yourself?
I would remind my 18-year-old self that life is not a race.
Yeah.
I would say definitely take time to be a kid. I think I started working, at the end of my freshman year of college, and
that was for Scooter Braun.
Yeah.
You were working then, and it was, it was almost a full-time job.
Yeah,
right?
I was interning for like the first couple years, but like 3 to 4 days a week, and spending a lot more time there than at school. And I think that was all good for me, and I wouldn't change anything. But I do think that, especially coming out of a place like Sidwell, where success is kind of like a given, that's just like what you're supposed to aim for. I think you can try to rush towards that, and I would tell myself, like, it'll come.
Yeah.
It'll happen on its own time. Don't force it.
Yeah.
You don't have to compete with other people. It's really like your life and you're in control. I think that would have been a really good lesson. And I also probably would have told her, like, you can't really tell someone not to be insecure, but I'd be like, maybe don't be. Maybe try to be more confident.
Sometimes we need to grow up for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. There was no reasoning with 18-year-old me. Like, the insecurity was there, and it's still there in many different ways. But I think I was very hard on myself, and I would suggest lightening up.
How did you work through that period of being so hard on yourself, and how have you been able to get perspective?
Therapy. I think that's been the biggest thing. I've always been very reflective, and I always wrote in high school, and that was the one thing I always knew I was good at. I didn't think about it as a career, but I knew that when I would write an essay, I was going to do well. There was the science and the math of it where I was like, right. But that has always helped me. I've always been very good at thinking about my feelings. But, I think therapy, which I was in therapy throughout Sidwell, and then I've taken breaks and gone back. And I think just having that person to give you perspective, and that person who's not fully engaged, like, in your life, to be able to point you in the right direction of how to work through these insecurities and what's real and what's not, has been the biggest thing for me. And I definitely have gotten a lot better at utilizing that resource in my late 20s.
Well, and there's a lot of pressure when you come out of school, too. Yeah. You mentioned everybody thinks that you're going to succeed. There's a kind of pressure that comes along with that. How did you navigate all of that? Because it takes a certain amount of courage to step away from that in a way and say, well, I'm going to do this at my own pace. Yeah.
I think I was forced to do it. I don't think I was handling the pressure well at all when I was in music. And I grew really unhappy. Just from not taking care of myself and never stopping. And so when I left to become a writer, I think a lot of people saw that as like a brave leap of faith. And I can see that. But what it really was I was burnt out and I had to stop. And I knew what I wanted to do instead. So I just said, fine, I'll do it. But it wasn't like I'm going to take this big leap. It was really like, there's no other option. I have to stop doing what I'm doing. And so that means I have to pivot.
Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to do that, though.
Thank you.
And to immerse yourself into something in the way that you have, and then to achieve the kind of success that you've been able to find as a result of it.
Thank you.
How do you feel about that, right? I mean, did you ever think that you'd be working on a Golden Globe-winning sitcom?
No. I really had no... It feels very separate from me. I feel like I'm very connected to Abbott, and I'm very proud of the show's success, but I tend to kind of put it on the table next to me and think, I think I learned the hard way that your job cannot be all of who you are. It cannot be your entire personality or the only thing that you have going on. I still am not great with like hobbies and things like that, but I try to not engage too much in the positive discourse around the show, because then to me I would have to also engage in anything negative that comes up, and I don't want to do that. So I just kind of try to stay out of it, but also, I want to make the best stuff that I can. So I work really hard, and I enjoy, going to the parties and going to the award shows. That's very exciting to me and very fun. But yeah, it kind of feels like maybe there are two versions of me, and there's the work version that gets to experience all that, and then I kind of go home and just feel like regular.
That seems pretty healthy to me.
Thank you. Yeah. It feels good.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think I'm not like celebrating wins but I do. I feel very excited for everything, but I also know that that's not everything that there is in life. So. And
you've achieved an awful lot in the time since you've left here. Do you have any dreams that you plan to pursue other than the screenwriting?
It's a good question. I think the main thing for me right now is just taking it one day at a time. I guess my dream would be to be open to anything and kind of go whatever ways life takes me. I like being flexible. I think switching careers in my mid-20s taught me that you can change your life whenever you want.
You can do it again if you want to.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not opposed to that. I think, I love writing, and I'll write for my whole life no matter what. But I don't know what I'll be writing or if that'll be all I'm doing. But yeah, I really just want to have like a good, happy life. So whatever I can do
That's
to
a good
achieve
goal.
That. Yeah.
Yeah, and that seemed it's such a great piece of wisdom to offer our students too, because you can come out and think that you want to do a particular thing. You come out of the school, or you might want to be an attorney, you might want to be a doctor, you might want to be an engineer, you might want to be a teacher, right? You might, but to remain open to other possibilities that may not have occurred to you. Yeah.
I think DC can be tough on that. I think it can be a very, you pick a thing and you go for it forever. And that's good if you love it. But a lot of the times people pick something that they don't love.
Yeah.
And my vote would be stop doing that. Yeah. If you can. Obviously, not everyone has the ability. But
sure.
if that's an option or if you can make it an option, I would always vote for that.
Yeah. This has been so nice to talk with you. Thank you for making time to be with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming back for Let Your Life Speak Day. You clearly have a lot to share with our students. We're very fortunate to have you back, and we're also very proud of everything you've accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so fun.
Yeah, it was fun.